Hello. Welcome. So, yeah, please take your seats. I would like to start my lecture now. But first of all, really, as it's now, it has been 3 years since I stood here on this stage, so I think I would really like to say thank you now at the beginning of this, of MD Lab 2022, to all of you here, to Jad and the team, and Annie, and the tech people up there that most of you don't even see. I'm so happy and thankful for being here and for, taking part in MD Lab again. And I think a big applause also especially to our friends and colleagues here in Lebanon who worked hard to make it happen, even though for all of us these last 2 or 3 years have been horrible. So thank you so much. We are back here. And I'm really much looking forward to this exchange, and I hope all of you have a great time, learn a lot, exchange, meet, and so on. And yeah, thank you LAU, thank you Beirut, thank you colleagues and friends. I'm super excited to be here. I will start off my lecture and linking a little bit to, I will be speaking in English, by the way. I hope that's okay, and the translators, thank you as well up there. And I will actually talk or link very much to what Jad said in the introduction to media and digital literacy, right? So here you see a graffiti I took a picture of from the protests that also happened here in Lebanon in 2020, for instance. In January, IT changes the world, and this goes really a little bit right into what I want to talk about and what we have already talked about with regards to media and digital literacy. So this idea of, okay, the digital tools, the digital media that are now at our disposition will help us to really create emancipatory content to change the world, right? We have heard this a couple of times in the introduction videos, and you see this hope and this idea, this utopia also reflected whenever there are like uprisings for social justice reflected maybe on the walls. So I think this is very, very relevant. In scholarship, in communication science, and my background is actually in political science and communication science, we talk here, for example, about the change in the networked public sphere, right? So we have now a public sphere that give more opportunities for marginalized actors to overcome state censorship. We had a shift in the forms of gatekeepers, like before you have journalists or editors and media houses that were like very much controlling also content. Now we have the many that can talk about their everyday lives, they can bring in different perspectives in their realities. So all in all, you could say we have a better accessibility of the public sphere for many people. And of course, digital literacy is here one of the major things to just like educate also people to make use of this public sphere. So one of the major important changes here is, for example, that this new media architecture, I'm talking now about this very especially digital media, allows also for regional networking. We have seen this in 2010, 2011 very prominently in Tunisia, in Egypt, with what was then later so-called the Arab Spring. But I mean, what we really saw was a regional protest, and I know many of you who have been here have also been studying it, have participated in it, and so this was really a very important momentum. And this momentum is still defining very much also the scholarship on questions of when it comes to digital activism. So all in all, I think we can say, we're safe to say that the change in the network public sphere leads to global social and political transformations. A very prominent incident, I already mentioned the uprisings in Tunisia, in Egypt, 2010, 2011, but I will be talking more particularly today as a case on feminist activism. And I think all of you, coming from different countries, do have some ideas in mind when we think of feminist activism through hashtags. I mentioned here Aufschrei because there's like a German hashtag that I studied in 2014, up until hashtag MeToo, but also passing through, for example, Taharrush, which was very majorly important in Egypt. So this is an example of feminist activism and emancipatory activism that were using really the digital tools to point out patriarchal violence, right? So now, just also to get you warmed up and like get you into the lecture, I would ask you, and I just take 3 answers. Maybe somebody can take the microphone and get it to the public. So I would just ask, also thinking of what you heard already in the introduction, what do feminist hashtags have to do with media literacy? I can take 3 answers, and please be very quick, just that we get like warmed up also. Associations. Yeah, what is the relation? Why do we talk about this now? Like why would it be important for media literacy? I see somebody there, 1, 2, and a 3rd person maybe. I go here? Okay. So 1, 2, 3, very quickly. Thank you.
So feminist hashtags specifically, for example, in Lebanon have a very positive impact if used properly in spreading awareness, for example, on sexual harassment, let's say, on topics that matter, because they're quick. They are made of 2 words that are specifically 1 word, 2 words, 3 words max that deliver a specific topic. So, for example, one of the latest in Lebanon were Nusaddiq and Najiyat, which is we believe the survivors. This is particularly for sexual harassment. It's quick, it spreads a message, and it gets stuck in the brain. That's why it's important.
Perfect, thank you so much. And it's contextualized, because you now really brought up the Lebanese discourse. So we had the 2nd person here.
I can give you an example that we initiated last year in our school, where an incident in a class where a student said that the teacher was ugly was initiated a social innovation project under the Wake Up No Makeup hashtag, and it brought awareness to beauty standards. What are the roles that women are, like women in, like generally are supposed to look like or behave like, and even it went into gender roles, expectations. And it started from a feminist point of view, but it ended up also tackling the issues of body image for all participants, even boys, girls, adults, youngsters. And I was that ugly teacher.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, this is also the part, right, to educate people and to bring more and more people also in using digital media. And I think you also have, no? Okay, someone else. I think a 3rd person wants to say something? Okay, I can also continue, because now we're coming to my next question, because you know, this lecture will address a little bit the pitfalls and the downfalls and the problems coming with using digital tools for emancipatory politics. So I talk about content moderation. What do you think, like when you think of content moderation, what could it have to do with media literacy? I say, when it comes to content moderation, what's the relation to media literacy? What are your associations? Why is it important to talk about it? Why is it important to research it? Okay, there is one person, yeah?
To a certain degree, content moderation can kind of like help with media literacy. I mean, if content is moderated, you can only very strictly, for example, you only see a specific kind of source, which can help to find like good sources, I guess. But it can also be kind of a censorship as well, because it cuts out other parts and other points of view, which could be crucial for for having a like well-founded opinion on something. So content moderation can definitely help media literacy, but also kind of like narrow your point of view and your ability to research whatever you want based on the fact that it has been cut out of a certain database, for example.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, over here. So we need to know how it operates, right?
If we do have content moderation, we literally say that we can control the mind through the media. So to have a free mind, we should know how it works. We should know how it blocks us. It puts us into, Google is not everything. It shows you exactly what they want to show you. So if we really want to be media literate, we really need to know how to play the game and be smarter than the device. We should be smarter than the content moderation. So we should know it.
Thank you very much. And maybe a third answer, third idea? Right there in the middle, or?
Probably content moderation helps prevent the spread of false information in certain places. Going back, also linking it to the hashtags, linking it to all the titles, for example, the fake titles that articles sometimes feed. When you moderate and regulate this content, it avoids and it prevents a negative backlash on what you're trying to educate people on. So that's mostly it.
Okay, thank you. I think from your answers, it became clear what is also like kind of my major takeaway for this lecture. It's the ambivalences when we're using social media for change. Melina Lim talks here about disconnection in the way that I wrote it here. On the one hand, of course, you have digital empowerment, example of feminist hashtags, where the stories of the many reveal like a pattern, a structure of oppression. It also helped, I can talk about the German context, to raise more awareness also in the mass media. Journalists were educated also on how to write, for example, about sexual harassment. And also the interactions between hashtags and the receptions and educating like a broader public. This is like the one hand, the positive side. But there's also a digital disempowerment side, I would say. I would talk about automated content moderation today, but of course there's also other threats, so to say, especially for vulnerable groups who use social media to, I would say for social justice reasons. For example, hijacks online, harassments online, doxing, for example, exposing the addresses of activists or journalists online. What is called in scholarship liquid surveillance. Liquid surveillance means the collaboration between the platforms that we use to spread our messages and our content, and the governments. So this cooperation between platforms, let's say the very large platforms used especially in the West, but also here are Facebook, Twitter, etc., right? In Russia and China there are other platforms, but I will mainly talk about these ones now. And the cooperation that is also made explicit. So it's not something that is hidden or a secret. It is explicit. And it is, of course, problematic because when we talk about, for example, automated content moderation, I will come to this now today. So my question, or the question here for this lecture is, how can algorithmic content moderation influence emancipatory mobilizations online? Again, what we also heard now also from your answers, there is this ambiguity. On the one hand, of course, you have empowerment and positive effects, but on the other hand, we also have to keep in mind how does content moderation actually work and whose content might be censored or moderated away. So I give you a quick outline today. I will not be too long, of course, but still I want you to get some theoretical perspectives and insights. The first is the socio-technological approach. Human solution, right? So we're still being in this social-technological approach. Then I talk quickly about research on platform governance, and then I bring up some analysis, and I will end on the improving or having ideas on content moderation techniques, and here media and digital literacy plays a major role. So in the frame of a socio-technological approach, meaning we always have to look at this, our social world, but at the same time we also have to see developments in technology and their interplay. They influence each other. Yeah, so the one does not work without the other. It's an interplay. So this is a little bit very briefly, very shortly said what is meant in the socio-technological approaches. I would say if you want to look at political participation, campaigning, emancipatory politics, you have nowadays in the digital age, you have to look at national, regional and local context on the one hand. There can be a classroom, as you said. This can be a country. This can be even also globally. This can be civil society actors or international organizations. And the way they use the international media ecology. So I hope it becomes clear from this little illustration what I want to say. Like when we want to look at political participation, we always have to look at these different levels of analysis. To stick to the socio-technological approach, in feminist scholarship it has been there for, like, yeah, as you see already, since 2007, and I think this quote is very helpful in understanding what it can mean and how it was thought even before we had the major platforms being used. It was just when the internet kind of came up, and feminist scholars at the time were like, this is a new technology, this could actually change the world or change like a lot of things for us. So Carstensen and Winker, for example, asked that we have to keep in mind how feminist actors construct and use the internet, on the one hand, this usage, but also how the internet actively intervenes and restricts or extends the scope of possibilities. And I think this, when we look at content moderation systems of platforms nowadays, becomes very, very up to date, a very crucial question, even it's from 2007. So we have to look always at both sides. What I said at the beginning, algorithmic content moderation systems on social media are deployed, just to have like one of the common definitions that is used now in our scholarship in Germany in particular is like, are deployed to conduct content moderation at large scale, this is the important thing, by major platforms for user-generated content such as Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. And the quote I just had from 2007, of course back then you did not need this kind of automated content moderation because we did not have that much data. So right now, as you know, we have different platforms like Instagram and Twitter. All of this did not exist back then. TikTok and so on. So of course, and more users and more media literate users as well, which is the positive side. So of course, platforms needed to look for other solutions. So this is not the question. You kind of need to introduce automated systems in order to like keep the media environment, kind of healthy, so to say, for everybody, but the question is how and who is suffering from it. So what we can state is that algorithms as new actors structure data, posts, so to say, arguments, and they organize information, what we've heard also here before. They assess what is appropriate content in the public sphere, so what is considered appropriate and what should be taken down. So, and I think a problem that we had for a long time is that this algorithmic content moderation appeared to be very neutral. This is linked very much, I would argue, to a technology optimism that is very often obstructing actually the critical assessment of things. Like we would say, technology can fix that problem. Oh, we have too many users, we have too much content now, we need to somehow moderate it, technology can fix it. So this was like the idea for a very, very long time. So I don't want to say now, I think what is important, to give all the blame to algorithmic content moderation. There's also always the users and the people who are using the platforms. So I think and to come back to, if you remember the socio-technological approach, we need to keep in mind for the social, so to say what Melina Lims calls the algorithmic enclave, an enclave as the agency of human users. So we are human, we're using this, we're not disappearing. We are also important in this analysis. But also the importance of algorithmic processes in the formation of how clusters function. So this is, again, what I think is important when we look at in the end, social mobilizations for justice. They are happening kind of in an algorithmic enclave. So in this way, we do not have this techno-determinism, which was like a huge issue for a long time, especially also in the scholarship like mine, where we were working on the uprisings, for example, in Tunisia, saying, Facebook is the solution, it's the technology that brought the change. No, of course not. This is meant with techno-determinism. And there's also no technological solutionism in the idea of, with the idea of, we can program an algorithm that will like make the media environment safe and give everybody the possibility to access content, to access and circulate their content. Sorry? About the algorithmic enclave? Okay. Yeah, what is your question?
Can you explain the idea of techno-determinism a bit more?
Techno-determinism, I mean, it comes from the idea that technology determines where we are going with, for example, social change. The example that I gave, when you talk about techno-determinism, it means we're prioritizing the technology as the thing that brings the change. And I think this is a problematic concept, because if we look also at colonial and imperial history, it has very long time been this idea that with technology and with new innovations comes automatically a development of society into a positive, better world, and the standard was, of course, Europe at the time, you know. So I think it has like a very embedded, also, colonialist, imperialist idea, this techno-determinism. Technology will make societies better, and the technology is, of course, created and exported by the people who can make them, right, or who have the power in the ecology. You will learn much more about this in the lectures also to come here. But just this idea of techno-determinism was important to unveil the limitations when we talked about social change, because very often then the actors, the users, the activists, the civil society went missing there. So, and I would just, I'm sorry? Maybe you can also keep the question, and we have later on, we will have some time to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah? Good? So let's look at, let's go back to actually how, and I know my students and the younger generation knows much better how this kind of content moderation interferes in their daily usage of media. So if activist content is removed, there are at least 3 scenarios why that is the case. So first, platforms deliberately take down activist posts and accounts at the request of in coordination with governments. That's what I talked about with regards to liquid surveillance. A second can be that a post can be removed through a user reporting mechanism. So after people can flag a post as being hate speech or being sexist or nudist and so on. Yeah, this is like the second. And the third is like the purely algorithmic content moderation. And this is the one that poses severe challenges. And we have also, like this lecture that I'm giving you now, we have not fully grasped yet, of course. This is like research in the making. And as I say, we do not have very much data and understanding on how it actually works, because it is very much hidden from the researcher's view. You need to collect narratives, you need to collect stories of people who have experienced it. So I'm coming now to the research on platform governance, because of course understanding how algorithms work and how what content can stay up on major social media platforms is of crucial importance. And the problem is that for governments, but also for activists, is that there is just no transparency and no democratic oversight on these platforms that have the power to manipulate, to set up the algorithms that determine what content can be seen and which one cannot. So, and as I mentioned it already before, the independent research is very difficult here. What we need is, again, and there I come back to the beginning, is the idea of the many that tell the stories, and from there you can extract like a pattern, like of people telling whose accounts have been hacked, whose accounts were offline, what content has been removed, and so on, because we do not have access to this data itself. So there is this research on platform governance, bringing in here, as I said, also the political science perspective. After like a more, they call it laissez-faire policy approach, the scholarship and also policymakers address this so-called techlash, and I would say also in particular in Europe, whereas I'm not 100% familiar with the discourse in the US, but I know that their regulation systems are far, far behind to the ones that are being elaborated at the level of the European level right now. I don't know for Lebanon, I've checked for Tunisia, it's very, very hard to address the issue of of content moderations by platforms and how governments should hold them responsible. It's very, they were also very much at the beginning, but there is civil society also fighting for that. What is of crucial importance in this research is to understand the aspect of private ordering, right? This is a concept that Golatz came up with, that we're not functioning through local legislations or through national legislations on what determines freedom of expression or not, what is allowed or not, but it's more the terms of services agreements and the community guidelines by these major companies. So this is, of course, when we come back to this, this is a major shift in the public sphere, and has major implications for democratic and emancipatory movements. So what is being seen by governments now is that there is a huge social cost of the platform economy, and they need to hold the Facebook and Twitter, for instance, more accountable, because they have so many users. They have so much power in being able to access and set up the algorithms. They need to be held responsible for eventual the spread of misinformation, polarization, influence of elections. So you see there is now much more understanding and also interest in not only understanding how automated platform moderation function, but also how they can be regulated by governments. What is lacking, of course, in this newer discourse are platform governance perspectives from intersectional feminist perspectives, meaning what does in particular this vulnerable group need to, how are they affected in particular, and how does this need to be translated into policy? So I said before, we do not really have access to primary data to understand how is content being moderated, removed, and so on. We need to really rely on different case studies. What we do know from now is that campaigns for gender justice suffer very much from content moderation through community guidelines. So there is a lot of unjust removal and in particular over-blocking, for example, from feminist content, LGBTIQ content. This has been stated already in the research. And that is, of course, a major problem. One idea is also, we're not talking only of activist politics, we're talking also about minor stuff that is really, it's not minor, but social and health, questions of health and women's health that are being censored and blocked. So, I give you the example of the picture also of protests of Aborigine women. Let me go there directly. Okay, I come later back to. This is, for example, an example that has become pretty prominent in scholarship also, but also in the media, to really understand how content moderation on major platforms works and how it affects, in particular, marginalized groups. So this is a picture that was accompanying a keynote address by Celeste Little on the occasion of International Women's Day. And this picture has been banned, and also the account of the professor, for nudity and sexually explicit nature, so harming the guidelines set up by the platform. Also, and this is another important aspect, it was argued by the platforms that it may be culturally offensive. And I find the answer by Little in response to this revealing and interesting. It's like she said, it's women practicing several millennia worth of culture, because it's and they are being censored and deleted, pushed away out of the public sphere by the community standards of a major US platform here in that sense, because it's supposed to be culturally offensive. So offensive for whom, right? And let me also go back to another example that I came across in 2012. 10 years ago, when I first learned about how content moderation is affecting feminist mobilizations in particular. That was the Uprising of Women in the Arab World. Maybe some of you have seen the campaign. Back then, 2012, it was pretty popular. And women from different countries, here you see Handa Shenawi for the Tunisian part, they would like join, it's like a selfie campaign protest, they would join the protest by saying why they are with the uprising of women in the Arab world. One of the pictures was also taken down. My investigation back then was talking with the women behind the network, who themselves also said, we don't know why the pictures are being taken down by the platform. So it can be several things, as I mentioned at the beginning with regards to disempowerment. It could have been like an algorithmic decision. It could have been flagged, but it could have also been like an automated flagging campaign, like a counter campaign. So the major issue here is, and I think this is like one of the most important points here, that we just don't know. So there is no transparency anymore. And especially for, as you know, for social justice movement, it's important to understand from where the censorship and the blocking comes from, where it comes from. So what is one of the explanations here is what I now call as regroup as technological biases and how they can be addressed. So more and more scholars are addressing this algorithmic bias in content moderation systems, and I will not go too much into that right now, but I will just give you here some references in case you are interested in reading up on it. And also I'm later, after the lecture, very eager to hear from your scholars or journalists or whoever who have written about it, because as I said, it's like we're still also at the beginning also on really shedding light and uncovering these biases. Sophia Noble was like brought in the term of algorithms of oppression, and hereby really opened the door to make sure that we understand also that this new media digital environment is very much also disempowering, not only empowering. And then there are oil banks, for example, working on automating inequality, exposing like the class, very much also classist structures of how these technologies work, the platforms work. Sexist assemblage is another concept created by Gerhard and Thornham. Platformed racism is another concept to investigate into these biases, or also algorithmic misogynie noire. What is also interesting, I call it matrix of domination in relation to Patricia Hill Collins, who's one of the most important intersectional theorists, like as you see in the Western academia in particular, matrix of domination 2.0, to also say this kind of new structures of oppression when it comes to moderating content, blocking users, is very much reproducing the power structures that we already have. So, and this is the next slide here, it is kind of even deepening discrimination, or it can deepen discrimination. So the major challenges for social justice mobilizations here are, as I said before, the unclear and arbitrary enforcement of rules. Also, how are they enforced? Regarding, for example, hate speech, this is pretty prominent because there we have like several cases. I'm sure maybe you also know of different journalists, I think Syrian journalists, who have been blocked because actually they made a campaign against terrorism or against hate speech, but using the same content, the algorithm is not able to detect, cannot contextualize, is this actually pro or against? So that led to them being blocked, even though actually they are working towards also the establishment and keeping up the community guidelines of the different platforms. And also in general, journalists and activist accounts are also more eager to get flagged. When you're prominent and when you're visible, more people might also see you, and this is also especially for feminist activists, so your account can get flagged by the many. This was what we saw with the campaign of the Uprising of Women in the Arab world. There is, Diaz and Hecht Felela have worked on the double standards in content moderation. They clearly state there are double standards. The content moderation system is not applied for everybody equally. But again, everybody having equal rights is something that governments have to guarantee. A private company has different interests. So you could say, of course, it's kind of their right, because this is not they don't have any democratic oversight, and this is not the rationale that they have to function in. So there are double standards that have been detected. And on another level a little bit is the idea of algorithmic prioritization. I'm sure you know this also from your everyday use of social media. Tufeci has analyzed this for the hashtag Ferguson, which later also merged or became very prominent with the hashtag Black Lives Matter, versus the Ice Bucket Challenge, if you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge. So she used these two hashtags as an event also to analyze and show how prioritization of algorithms work, just because Ice Bucket Challenge, you had videos, you had like many prominent people, all of this works well, you had pictures, you had feel-good mentality, you could put likes, many likes, whereas hashtag Ferguson, showing pictures, like not even exposing or showing pictures of dead bodies, you don't want that, you don't want to like talk about police brutality in words, and there's nothing to like about. So from the very way they are shown and portrayed, the algorithms would prioritize Ferguson. So, the Ice Bucket Challenge. So if you open your social media, and there's this, of course, you know, it's like it has like also a snowball effect, so to say. So many would not even see hashtag Ferguson because all their feeds are clustered with the Ice Bucket Challenge. So major questions for us, I think, also in studying media and digital literacy, and looking at these pitfalls and these negative also developments, is whom and what gets to moderate content. Also, of course, there are also people we have, especially after content is being flagged, it often also goes to human content moderators, which is another issue in itself, because it is very hard to also moderate cruel pictures, pictures of war, and so on. So, and these kind of moderators often do not have psychological support or anything, are not being paid very well as well. So we have a new class of content moderators being created that basically have to look at a lot of, sorry my word, shit that is being posted on social media in order to moderate it away. So this is another issue that I cannot go into right now, but just to understand why I say whom and what, because you have, of course, the algorithm as a what, as a technology, but also still there are humans moderating the content. But this chain of liability in content moderation, automated versus human, is also not always transparent. We don't necessarily know, as I said before, is this now due to a human or due to automated content moderation that my post is down or my account is down. Another question is, who are the users who flag? So, for example, is it an orchestrated attack towards a campaign? that would help if we could, like, where I come to the solutions right now, we need to also know who are they, these users. Because what we also know that your users tend to flag content according to their own ideologies. So, and yeah, I will now come already to the improvements, or like suggestions or points of discussion that we can also, discuss after my lecture and also during the academy. I would say there are at least 3 major points to like kind of improve content moderation. The first is on the level of the internal, the self-control. So what should platforms be doing? Like, how can they be held responsible to, for example, avoid orchestrated flagging? So one idea is to disaggregate data by race and ethnicity and gender in content moderation guidelines. To also make more visible and understandable who flagged the content, whose content was flagged. We don't have this data. We don't know which guideline was breached, such as this is also something that sometimes is being done, like to understand why is my post taken down. You get kind of an explanation, but not necessarily. Yeah? So what is the guideline that has what's the rule you did not confirm to? So this is like the internal perspective. The external perspective that's more than on the level of governance is installing an algorithm inspection. That's one idea by the Ada Lovelace Institute. Again, this is not my idea. This is this institute, for example, they work very much also on this at the interface of technology, but also understanding the social impacts. So we need much more interdisciplinary research in order to come up with this kind of solutions. So this algorithm inspection that should be set up, I don't know, by governments or on the regional level. I don't think on the global level. I don't think on the UN level. But the idea is that they will require detailed evidence on companies' policies, processes, and outcomes. So the companies are being held more responsible in unveiling what kind of content moderation practices they are currently using, and how they might also change it in the future. So this is the idea on the external platform governance. And I will finish today with this idea of media literacy as a non-regulatory form of content moderation. Coming back to the very first question. And this is like the third category. When we have internal and external, I would say this is the third category of non-regulatory ways. And there are 2 approaches. The activist approach, which is designing new platforms. We heard this also at the beginning in the movies, how important it is to also just set up maybe new platforms and bring in your colleagues or your fellow activists or fellow journalists. So you're not even under this rule, under the community standards of platforms. So, or you could also like look out for more alternative platforms such as Tumblr, but I know that this is also, I think, changing. But in general, you could say more smaller platforms, maybe use smaller platforms. And also, and this is again something where I rely on the knowledge of students and the people that are also involved. It has also a lot to do with context, using codes that algorithms do not detect, such as white, written W-Y-T-E, when you want to talk about white supremacist systems. But maybe using white might already moderate your post away. Or lesbian, as I said, LGBTIQ content, writing it in that way, the content moderation system might not detect it. I know also there are many examples, for example, from Palestine, the ways that you can write certain words so the moderation does not detect it. And last but not least, so this is like the more activist approach that is also changing constantly, such as also the moderation systems change constantly. So we need, social justice movements need to adapt their methods constantly. But I think something that is not so much in the moment, but on the long term very important is exactly this educational approach on media and digital literacy. As here, Mutua and Country have looked at it for Eastern African countries and try also to lobby and argue that it is important to bring that into really a policy approach. So governments really use media and digital literacy as and understand it as a form of content moderation. So the promotion of ethical user behavior is one idea here. And also in general raising awareness on online violence and discrimination and how it works. Besides of course knowing, and what we said at the beginning, knowing there are different forms of content moderation. What I see has been moderated. It's not the one-on-one posts. It is an edited reality, an edited media reality. And it affects in particular also vulnerable groups and social justice movements. And there are ways that you need to work against it and address it. So, and I would leave it here for now, and thank you very much.